Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Whitney Goodman, and today I'm going to be talking about that viral article in the New York Times, The Unspoken Grief of Becoming a Grandparent. This article was published in November 2024, and wow, people had some pretty wild thoughts about it. It's taken me a little while to put together mine, but I am finally ready to share them with you. Grandparent issues have become a popular topic at Calling Home, and for good reason. There have been some immense shifts in the ways adults relate to their parents, and the landscape of what grandparenting looks like has changed tremendously. Less adults are having children, and many grandparents are still working full time. A little more than half of adults 50 and older had at least one grandchild in 2021, down from nearly 60% in 2014. Amid falling birth rates, more US adults say they're unlikely to ever have children for a variety of reasons. Chief among them is they just don't want to. So, where does that leave adults who are choosing not to have children? What do grieving grandparents do? And how does this choice and grief impact the relationship between the adult child and their parent? Let's get into it. This New York Times article about grandparents had some impactful stories. There's Lydia Burke, who's 56, and she's held on to her favorite copy of The Velveteen Rabbit since her three children, now in their 20s and 30s, were young. She loved being a stay at home mother and hoped one day to be a cool grandma, but none of her children want to have kids. And though that decision is right for them, she says, it still breaks her heart. She said, I don't have young children anymore, and now I'm not going to have grandchildren. So that part of my life is just over. There are a lot of grandparents out there that feel the way that Lydia Burke does. But there was also a little bit of pushback on this article. Rachel Verena for the Betches website wrote why the article is respectfully bullshit. She basically goes on to talk about, while she can acknowledge their sadness, but we really have to address the elephant in the room. A lot of these potential grandparents haven't done the bare minimum to address the trauma they passed down to their children. And she questions how they're mourning the chance to shape a future generation when they haven't even fully patched things up with this one. And she goes on to say, and I quote, maybe before getting all victimy about your imaginary grandkids, take a moment to check in on the kids you actually raised. Because the truth is, a lot of millennials and Gen Zers are still unpacking generational baggage, while boomers and Gen Xers are daydreaming about cute onesies. Ouch. I asked my community on Instagram how they felt about this article, how they felt about having to give their parents grandchildren, and just how they feel about this whole thing in general. One of them said, no kids here. Can tell that disappointed my mom, but I won't have kids to fulfill others. When I told my mom I'm not having kids, she said, why am I even still alive then? It's often not unspoken, even if it's not directly expressed, and it's rarely unspoken. And this is something that I think is the biggest issue here with this article is that in the title, they put the unspoken grief, right? I'm a therapist that works primarily with adults who have dysfunctional families or issues with their parents. And in my experience, this grief is rarely unspoken. It's actually constantly being spoken. In fact, I think many adults feel that their job as children to their parents in adulthood is to give them grandchildren. And they're often actually made to feel like they are a disappointment, an embarrassment. They are not fulfilling their duty because they did not have children. I think for some of these parents, there's also this reality that parenting was more about the end result and not about the process or enjoying it while it was happening. It was kind of like, if I do these things, I will get the end result of a child who is always indebted to me or that owes me, or I will get a grandchild, or I will get, you know, whatever that thing is on the other end of parenting. I think also a lot of parents were not told that they had a choice about becoming parents. Many of them did not have a choice. And so instead, they chose to have children. And then because of that choice, they thought, well, okay, at least I'll get to be a grandparent, or at least this part of my life has been decided for. And I think that's the biggest piece here that is such a struggle, is that it is very challenging when things don't go according to plan or the way that you saw that they were going to go. So, for many adults who are retired, they have adult children, they don't have a lot to necessarily fill their day in terms of like work and structure. They likely imagined that it would be grandchildren that they would be interacting with and that would be filling their time. And that was kind of like their retirement plan. And when things don't go that way and it doesn't at all align with this vision that you had, it is painful and destabilizing. Now, let's talk about why this is really hard for adult children. I think many adults are wondering, what is my responsibility to my parents? And at what point am I supposed to stop trying to make them happy? Should I make decisions that will create a lot of stress, discomfort, a lot of issues in my life, or maybe things that I cannot take on? In order to make them happy. And what does that look like if I sacrifice myself to this degree to make them happy? They also express that they don't like their life being dictated to them or being told what to do, and that many of them feel like they are having children in a completely different world than their parent, and their parent is not taking that into consideration. I also want to point out that this is likely not the first time that this type of dynamic has happened in this relationship. I find that in relationships where the parent is putting a lot of pressure on their adult child to give them grandchildren, make them happy, do this certain thing, that expectation has already existed in other areas of life. These are likely dynamics where the adult feels like they're being told what job to have, what religion to follow, who to marry. There are a lot of expectations and a lot of preconceived notions, and that can make it feel like this is just one more thing that you want me to do, or that you're telling me that I have to do in order to be quote unquote like worthy of your love or a full adult, whatever it is. And when I asked my community on Instagram about this, a lot of them had things to say. One person said, my mom has 8 grandkids and doesn't care about them past the baby stage, can't be bothered. Adult child here who wanted to be a mom so badly but felt terrified to repeat generational cycles. Another reason why adults may not be having children or giving their parents grandchildren. While they would never say it to me, it feels like I've disappointed them. I have, but it's hard when they want them but don't want to help with them. And this is another big thing, is that I think a lot of adults that I speak with are feeling like they want to possibly have children, but they need help. And when it feels like the parent is putting a lot of pressure on them to have grandchildren, they kind of want some reassurance that, like, okay, if I'm going to do this for us, you need to be involved. And unfortunately, I think what happens a lot is that some parents want a specific grandparent experience. They want to be involved on holidays and birthdays. They want, to maybe pop in every now and then, but they don't actually want to be involved in like the raising of the child, right? And so it can feel like, okay, I'm doing this for you. I'm giving you a grandchild, but you don't want to help me. And I'm not really sure if I can sustain this or take this on my own. And if an adult decides to have children, they are ultimately going to be the ones that are actually responsible for that child and have to do all the work. And so it can sometimes feel like, you want me to take on this big project, but you're not willing to help me. You're not going to be here forever to help me. And so it's kind of unfair to ask me to take on all that responsibility without any of the help. This type of pressure from a parent to an adult child can really disrupt the relationship between the two of them. Let's talk about why that is. In the New York Times article about this, Dr. Mulqueen, who has counseled many baby boomers through their longing for grandchildren, has found that the decision to remain child free can strain the parent child relationship, particularly when a parent who has dreamed of grandchildren fails to separate any personal disappointment they feel from a sense of being disappointed in their children. And this is something I have absolutely seen reflected in my own work, particularly with the adults who are being pressured to have children. What often happens is that when the adult does not provide the grandparent, the potential grandparent with grandchildren, they are made to feel like not only are they disappointing their parent, but they are a disappointment. They did not do what they were supposed to do. And sometimes it can feel like they're being like, well, what's the point in me even having a relationship with you if there's not going to be grandchildren? And when there are not grandchildren involved, I think that the parent and the adult have to work a lot harder to establish a bond and a relationship through adulthood because they don't have this common bond of these young children to kind of rally around and be a source of connection and like a reason that we even see each other. The adult child also feels like I'm responsible for your happiness. I have to go through pregnancy and childbirth and raising a child and paying for a child just to make you happy. And that can be a huge burden to carry. One person shared with me, I've not given my parents the grandparent experience they fantasized about because she only had one child. And so there are also situations where it can be like, oh, you did it, but you didn't exactly do it right. And that brings me to my next point, which I think is something that no one has really talked about yet, that someone put in my question box when I asked about this on Instagram. And that is the impact on the kids, the grandkids. Someone shared with me, I feel like nobody talks about how objectified kids are in families like this. I wish that was in the discourse. And I totally agree with you. And I want to bring that forward today. Someone else also said, I was a kid who was given to my grandparents a puppet responsible for their fulfillment. We really do need to consider this, that when you are having children solely to make a grandparent happy, a lot can go wrong, right? Because I think that if you are in this type of relationship with a parent, then this is likely a parent that has a lot of expectations. And I would bet that they not only have expectations about getting grandchildren, but also about what kind of grandchildren those grandchildren will be. Will they look a certain way, have certain hobbies, get certain grades in school? Will they dress, according to what's appropriate to them? Will they act in a certain way? And when this happens, you have this child that is coming into the world already with an identity that they did not consent to. And they are essentially being told, I brought you here as a gift to this person. Now perform and be how they want you to be. And this is dangerous. This is like slippery slope, guys, that I think it can be really, really unfair to that child. And if any of you have experienced that, I would love to hear from you in the comments, how that felt for you as a child or even as a parent, who brought a child into this world and then realized, oh my gosh, my parents have all of these beliefs and like preconceived notions and expectations about how my child should be. And what is that doing to my kid, to my relationship with my kid, and my relationship with my parent? Your adult child is not having kids. What can you do? You are absolutely allowed to have your feelings and to be upset. It is upsetting to have a vision for your life and not have it come true. It's even harder to feel like that is not within your control. And I get that. I think every grandparent, every parent has the right to mourn a future or a dream that they did not get. And I think it's important that non-grandparents explore like different avenues of fulfillment at this stage in their life. If you miss spending time with younger children, you can find ways to get involved with other kids. You can volunteer, get a job working with children, do something, help with your friends' grandkids, do other things to be around kids and get that experience of being like a mentor in the way that you would as a grandparent. Is it totally going to be a perfect substitute for that? Absolutely not. But it's certainly going to help you feel like you can kind of get that need met. It's also important to acknowledge that sometimes you are romanticizing something that would not actually be that way. When we have a vision of how things are supposed to go, a lot of times it is an idealized picture of you like sitting around reading to your grandchildren, baking cookies with them, and you really don't know how this would play out. Your grandchildren could maybe not be interested in anything that you like. They could live across the country. They could move. There are people who have grandchildren who also are deeply struggling with those relationships. And I think it's important to kind of check in sometimes with your fantasy and say, is this totally what it would be like? Or maybe would things be a little bit different than I'm imagining? Could there be more nuance to that? And that can sometimes help you with your grief and help bring you like down a little bit. This is the most important tip I'm going to give you. You need to share your feelings about this with your friends, your therapist, or your partner, not your adult child. And that is because it is so difficult to frame this in a way that is just your disappointment and not your disappointment with your child. Again, it is totally understandable for a parent to feel sad about not ever having grandkids. A lot of people have really special relationships with their grandparents and they're excited to pass that on. And everyone is entitled to their feelings. All of this can be true at once. You can support your adult child's decision to not have kids of their own and also grieve the fact that you'll never get to experience something that is important to you. And it's really important then for you to try to form a relationship with your adult child that is about more than potential grandkids, but that is actually about the two of you sharing a bond and having a relationship outside of that role. Now, let's talk about what adult children can do who are deciding that they do not want to have kids and they have parents that are maybe upset about this or they want to tell their parent about it. It's really important that you communicate with honesty and empathy. You don't have to take responsibility for their feelings, but it is important to note that, okay, my parent might have expectations about this. So, how can I communicate it in a way that is considerate of them? You don't have to just come out and say, like, Mom, I'm not having kids. Get over it. It's not a big deal. Like, why are you so upset? You can say, I know that you may have thought I was going to have kids, but I've decided I'm not going to have children for XYZ reason. I hope that you understand that and that you can have some level of understanding about my decision. I think it's okay when parents want to ask questions calmly and compassionately, or they want to understand your reasons for not wanting to have children better. That's okay. And you can engage in that kind of dialogue with them if it feels comfortable to do so. If they start attacking your reasons, trying to tell you that your reasoning is wrong, that's a different story, right? And I think it's always important to come back to this place that you get to decide whether you're going to be a parent. I think that choosing to become a parent is the biggest responsibility. And I honestly am a huge proponent of people taking more time to make that decision and really understanding what they are taking on. And if you kind of don't want to be a parent, probably not the best thing for you to do because it is a lifelong commitment. It is very challenging. And deciding to have a child for another person is not going to end well. It's also okay to not set something in stone if you haven't decided for yourself and give yourself the freedom to change your mind. It's okay to tell your parent, right now I don't think I want to have kids, but if I change my mind in the future, I'll let you know. Until then, I don't really want to keep bringing it up and talking about it because I'm just working through this on my own. I will let you know if and when I've changed my mind or I've completely decided. This conversation can be fluid and it's supposed to be. I'm a parent, and there were certainly times in my life where I was like, I don't know if I'll become a parent. I don't know when I will or what that will look like. And there were other times in my life where I thought, wow, I really want to be a parent. Or I thought I definitely want to have another child, or I definitely don't want to have another child, that it's okay for this to be in flux. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful to grandparents and adults who are deciding to have children or people who are working through this complicated relationship dynamic. I'm Whitney Goodman. I'm the co-founder of Calling Home. You can always join the Family Cycle Breakers Club at callinghome.co. We know that family can be really weird, and we hope that Calling Home is super helpful to help you untangle all of those problems that you might be having with your family in adulthood. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you again next week.